All right, welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. We might have just witnessed the best race of the year. I know we said it after China that sprint race was the best racing we'll see all year. And one race later, we might have seen a new contender for best race of the season. Brandon, after what we just witnessed, how the heck you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Yeah, it was awesome. It's a great weekend and got to watch the race live, which is really fun. And it was a great race to watch live. So it was awesome. I'm feeling great. Formula One is fantastic right now. So that's great.
Formula One is fantastic always. It's the best sport in the world for a reason. We have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into it with my one sentence rundown. It was the best weekend of the year, but I'm still not sold on Miami as a track. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, so I'm going to focus on the first part of my one sentence first, that it hands down was the best weekend of the year. Started with the sprint race. We had action all throughout. The sprint race wasn't really any action for who was going to win, but obviously you had Daniel Ricciardo holding off Carlos Sainz and Oscar Piastri for the entire sprint race. What an incredible performance from him, bringing home a good haul of points. Part of me is a little sad that fourth place in an RB equals 5 points and not 12 points because it was a sprint race, but that's okay. Still a great performance. And then K-Mag with Lewis Hamilton and Yuki Tsunoda just going crazy on his defense there. Great racing in the sprint race. And then obviously the main Grand Prix action, again, seeing people out of cycle because of the safety car. We did see an on-track incident, which Kevin Magnussen was once again involved in. And then clearly having a new winner with Lando Norris winning his first Grand Prix. It was the best weekend of the year. But Miami as a circuit almost was so bad that that's what allowed it to be a good weekend. Overtaking couldn't happen because it's such a street circuit that is only used for this, that it gets so incredibly dusty offline that you can't make overtakes. I'm still not a fan of DRS happening after one lap, which isn't a Miami issue. It's a Formula One issue, but just the DRS trains that happened and no one could overtake because the worst chicane in the sport is right before the backstretch. Like Miami being so bad and not allowing for overtakes is almost what made this weekend so good. But the main point is that it was a great weekend, not that Miami's bad. Let's just focus on the fact that it was a great weekend.
Yeah, it was a great weekend, but I think you're right. I mean, it did highlight a lot of issues. I mean, it was awesome that Daniel Ricciardo was able to hold off, um, those Oscar Piastri and who else was it?
Carlos Sainz.
Carlos Sainz. That's right. Yeah. For the entire sprint race, but at the same time, part of that is because there isn't a lot of great overtaking opportunities on the track. So yeah, it's a fun track and it's a fun place to have a track, but and we said this last week, but it just feels like it wasn't as well thought out as it could have been. But Miami is a great environment. I think it's awesome that they have the stadium in the middle, the infield of the track, and that's where the paddock is. That's really cool. But yeah, my one sentence rundown for the weekend is Lando Norris has arrived. All caps, bunch of exclamation points at the end of that one. But we were talking about this literally just a couple weeks ago about how, there's this, quote unquote narrative developing around Lando Norris and him not being able to deliver in moments that are big and when he has good opportunities. But he did it. And man, there was a little bit of luck involved with the safety car falling when it did. But man, he won that race fair and square. Max was right behind him, and Lando held him off and won by decent margin. That McLaren is definitely fast.
Yeah, I'll said it before, I'll say it again, that you can't fault someone for inheriting a P1 and then having the composure and pace to maintain it for the rest of the race and win. So yes, you can say that it was a lucky win, but Lando Norris still had to do a lot to win that race. I think for sure the pace of the McLaren this weekend is something to be excited about as Formula One fans. I think Oscar Piastri had a very underrated weekend because he ended up having that contact with Carlos Sainz at the end of the race and not scoring any points in the main Grand Prix. But for a portion of the race, it looked like he was going to be the McLaren that was on the podium, maybe even challenging for P2. He was putting in some very solid laps, and obviously with the safety car, he ended up getting pushed down to what would have been P4, P5, and then had the contact and finished outside the points. He didn't even have all the upgrades on the car this weekend. And so I can't wait to see what happens when both McLarens have all of the upgrades. But yeah, I think solid weekend from Oscar Piastri, solid weekend from McLaren as a whole. And obviously, Lando Norris winning his first race. Future Justin, just like play the clip right here where I said that Lando Norris is going to win a race in 2024. All right, there you go. I said it. I predicted it. It happened. I mean, what a race. As soon as that safety car came out, there was no doubt in my mind that Lando was going to win. And then the safety car restart happened, and brother almost got overtaken by Max Verstappen before they even reached turn one. But he held him off, kept his composure, and Lando Norris is now a race winner in Formula One.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and it's definitely something that Lando's deserved for quite a while. It's a long time coming, and you can just see how happy he was and then how happy everybody else was. I mean, there's no shortage of like 10 drivers that came up to him immediately after the race, congratulating him, and that's a really cool thing to see. All those other drivers who have won races before know what that feeling is like, and to get to share that moment with Lando for a little bit is a special thing for them, and shows the sportsmanship and camaraderie that the Formula One drivers have off the track.
Yeah, I think Max almost looked happier for Lando than Lando did for Lando when they were sitting there. Max was just looking like a happy, proud dad staring at him from the P2 slot. But that was awesome to see. We've got to ask the question every time something that happens that shows us a little crack in Red Bull's armor. Could the championship somehow be back on after this? I know we have seen an incredible path of development from McLaren in years past, and it's looking like this year is no different. That McLaren so far has been the team to beat in terms of upgrades providing performance. If we keep seeing this trend, if it keeps looking like there's the teams are catching up to Red Bull, could somehow, some way, we see a championship fight this year?
I don't want to say yes, and I don't want to say no either. But this weekend, honestly, the pace of the McLaren is kind of scary. I mean, that car was really, really fast, and I don't know. And we can talk more about what Red Bull looks like right now too. There's a lot of stuff going on with them internally with the team. Adrian Newey obviously is stepping down, and that's a big deal. So I don't know how immediately we'll see the effect of him leaving the team. But maybe Red Bull's not going to win another race in 2024.
That would be absolutely insane. But it is true that this was the first time that we've seen a Red Bull genuinely beaten on track in a while. And obviously they found some damage on Max's car that could have played into that, but Sergio Perez was nowhere to be found either, and he would have finished way down the order if it weren't for the Carlos Sainz incident and ensuing penalty and all the things that helped boost Sergio to P4. But, obviously we're not going to see the Red Bull car get incredibly worse because Adrian Newey stepped aside. We're not going to see the immediate effects of that. But the turmoil that is going on in the team could very well have an impact on operations, on attitudes within the team, and just small things that you wouldn't think would have a massive impact. But because Formula One is such a sport of fine margins, that it could have an impact on how the team performs over the course of the weekend. And then, McLaren, just with the way that car looked this weekend, they should have been on for sprint pole, but you had the mistake from Lando Norris and just kind of the weird session that SQ3 and then even Q3 was as well. But that car looks like it has genuine pace. And so obviously it was just one race. We can't draw conclusions from this and say Red Bull are wash and McLaren are going to win the championship by 200 points this year. But it is something that is exciting to watch. And I think we have had a couple times this season where we thought the championship would be written off since January, but we've had these glimmers of hope that we get to hold on to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the next couple races are great races to kind of give us a picture into the legitimate pace of the McLaren going forward. I mean, Imola is a track that has, a lot of different elements to it. And then obviously Monaco is after Imola, and, qualifying is such a big part of the Monaco weekend. Does, McLaren's pace kind of allow them to qualify well in Monaco and be successful there? So I think we've got a couple good tracks kind of judge the legitimate pace of the McLaren and how effective it's going to be the rest of the season. So I think the next couple of weekends will be pretty telling. But it's an exciting, uh, you know, position to be in as Formula One fans.
All right, let's get into the nitty gritty of it. Who is your podium pusher of the weekend this time out in Miami?
My podium pusher of the weekend, we talked about him a little bit already, is Oscar Piastri. I think Oscar had a solid weekend, and it is so unfortunate that his Grand Prix did not end up the way that it should have been, I guess you could say. But I mean, he finished P13, cross the line P13, and honestly, that for the contact happening and then him having to go into the pits and get it front wing change. I mean, for him to pick up, I think 7 spots before the end of the race. I mean, fantastic recovery drive. He probably wasn't going to get any points unless something crazy happened. But I mean, he was going for it, and that was awesome to see. And he was doing well when he was driving up in P2 as well. I think, had things gone a little bit differently, Oscar was definitely on for a podium. So it was a fantastic race from him, and overall, I think it was a great weekend from him. So Oscar's my podium pusher of the weekend. He had some great overtakes, kind of running back up through the field towards the end of the Grand Prix, and it was just a lot of fun watching him race this weekend.
Yeah, I think Oscar Piastri is a great pick. And before everybody gets angry and say, you picked Oscar Piastri, he wasn't the McLaren who won the race. That safety car doesn't happen. There was very clearly a scenario where it could have been Oscar Piastri as the sole McLaren on the podium. And then the story is Oscar Piastri just got a podium over Lando Norris, and he didn't even have all the upgrades on it. So Oscar Piastri, very, very solid weekend, even though the results don't show it. You have to remember, he did out-qualify Lando in the sprint and was the McLaren to bring home points in the sprint. So another little bonus points towards Oscar Piastri's weekend there. My podium pusher of the weekend, I picked a team, and that is Visa Cash App RB. Talked about him a little bit, but scoring points in both races, had a double score in the sprint with Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda both bringing home points, and then Yuki Tsunoda getting that P7 in the race. Over doubled their points total for the season. They now have a clear gap over Haas. Haas have been consistently scoring 1 or 2 points a weekend, but with RB having these point scoring weekends that they're starting to stack up now, I think there's a clear gap over Haas. They've claimed 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, and I think something crazy would have to happen for them to lose that 6th place now. You could even make an argument that they could start to close up on Aston Martin. Aston Martin did not look great this weekend at all. They haven't really looked great this season. They've looked like a very clear 4th or 5th fastest team. Any upgrades that they've brought in haven't really brought in any extreme improvements in pace. And then with Mercedes having the struggles that they're having, I think there's more points position available than we originally thought at the beginning of the season. We thought it would be very 2x2 and points would be very hard to come by for the midfield. But with Aston Martin and Mercedes starting to fall back into the clutches of the midfield a little bit, I think we're starting to see more points scored. I think that could lead to a very, very tight midfield battle.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, our Visa Cash App RB had a great weekend. It was so exciting watching Daniel Ricciardo be successful again, qualifying, P4 and then finishing P4 in the sprint. That was really cool. And then, his race didn't really pan out, but Yuki drove a great race and picked up a good haul of points for RB in the main Grand Prix as well. So, I mean, kind of good teamwork to get a solid haul of points from the weekend for RB. And I think they are kind of closing that gap a little bit. It'll be interesting to see in the weeks going forward how that that pans out. So
The gap is still fairly big, but
it is.
yeah, it's definitely could be closing down if we continue to have weekends like this. Before we move on to back marker, got to give a quick shout out to Alpine. If we're talking about midfield teams scoring points, good job, Alpine. First point of the year, Esteban Ocon bringing it home. Got to give him a shout out. Also got to shout out the hometown hero, Logan Sargent. I think he is having his best weekend so far. Unfortunate to be taken out by Kevin Magnussen during the race, but P10 in the sprint. What a performance. Outqualified Alex Albon for the first time in his career. Don't care if it was on a technicality and Alex had his lap deleted. Alex is the one who made the mistake, and Logan is the one who got the qualifying dub on him. So good job, Logan Sargent. There have been rumors of him being replaced. I don't think it's going to happen mid-season, but Logan Sargent, perhaps one of his best weekends of his career. Definitely the best weekend he's had all year.
Yeah, definitely. Logan, that I feel like on the broadcast they were talking about it a lot of Logan potentially just being replaced, like really this being his last weekend as a driver for Formula One or for Williams. And I think that's just a bit of a dramatic take on it. And, I think James Vowles is a very smart team principal, and I don't know that he would want to take a risk on a new driver midway through the season. And I'm not sure who they bring on. I've heard maybe like Kimi Antonelli, but I mean, Kimi's 17 years old, so he's going to have some learning curves as well. But I think Logan will keep his seat till the end of the year, and if he's successful, maybe beyond that. But
all right, let's hit it. Who is your back marker of the weekend this time out in Miami?
My Miami back marker of the weekend is going to be Lance Stroll. Lance, we did say Aston Martin didn't have a great weekend, but Lance just he kind of started off the weekend well. I think he got like P5 and FP1, and then qualified like P7 for the sprint. And obviously, he didn't do very well in the sprint, and then it's kind of just putzing around in like P12 the entire race, and ended up not in the points. So again, it kind of feels like a cop-out answer to say that, because we've kind of dogged on Lance Stroll a lot on this podcast. We made it very clear that we believe he is not getting the most out of that car, and Fernando Alonso is. But that still doesn't change the fact that I don't think Lance had a great weekend. And I really think that if Aston Martin is serious, and they're serious about winning world championships, they do need to take Lance Stroll out of that seat and put somebody who's a little bit more experienced and in that seat, a little bit more hungry. I don't know who that would be, but somebody else.
Literally anybody else. Hear me out. Put Yuki Tsunoda in that seat when Honda gets there. I think he'd thrive outside of the Red Bull family, but that's just my thoughts. I think Lance Stroll is a great answer. He started the weekend out great. He out-qualified Fernando Alonso in sprint qualifying, and then decided to just absolutely turn it in on his teammate in the sprint race, and was part of that incident that led to Lando Norris spinning out. Both of them would retire from that race. And then, just not a great performance in the main Grand Prix. His teammate did score points, and Lance couldn't close down a Haas and an Alpine to get into the points himself. And it's just one of those things that those are cars that an Aston Martin should be catching and passing, and he wasn't even making up ground on them. And so, bad weekend from Lance Stroll for sure. My back marker is Kevin Magnussen, and I really struggled to make Kevin Magnussen my back marker because he was such a source of entertainment in the sprint weekend. But I do think he went a little bit over the edge. I'm all for driving for your teammate. I think of Sergio Perez slowing down Lewis Hamilton in Abu Dhabi 2021 for Max Verstappen to catch up. That's great. Kevin, he went a little over the edge. The contact that he made, literally going over the edge of track limits. I think that was a step too far, and just not a great showing of sportsmanship from him. He was still a clear step behind Nico Hülkenberg this weekend. Hülkenberg outqualified him on both occasions, finished in the points in both occasions, with Kevin Magnussen not bringing home any points. And K-Mag's 2 penalty points away from a race ban. I don't think the race ban is going to happen. It would look terrible for the FIA to ban one of the drivers, so I don't think he will ever reach the 12 total. But getting the amount of penalty points that he did this weekend is just crazy, and he's very close to that race ban. So, yeah, not a great weekend from Kevin Madison, even though I'm thankful for his services in providing entertainment for us.
Yeah, it was fun to watch him race this weekend, but yeah, it's crazy that he's that close to a race ban. And if it does get to that point, I mean, K-Mag might be crazy enough to do something to warrant those few extra points to get him to a race ban. So if that does happen, it would be very interesting to see how the FIA handles it. Because I agree with you. I think it would not look great for the FIA to ban one of their 20 Formula One drivers for a race. Yeah, so we'll see what happens, but something to think about for sure.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see Ollie Behrman in that Haas earlier than we expected. Who
Maybe so.
knows? Oh, even maybe this is the only way Kevin can keep a seat. He's not on Nico's level driving, so like you have to absolutely play the team game to keep your seat. Otherwise, you got someone coming for you. I don't know, but I feel like it sets a bad precedent for Formula One to just say a driver can do whatever he wants in defense. Like imagine in Abu Dhabi 2021 if Sergio Perez had just sent it up the inside into Lewis Hamilton and Max won the championship that way, and Sergio gets what 3 penalty points, and everybody just moves on. So I think it just puts the FIA in a tough spot for sure.
It does, yeah, it does. Yeah, it's crazy to think like that happening in a circumstance that has larger bearing than what this weekend did, what that would warrant, and how it would be handled. But
maybe so. And we know the FIA is just so consistent with the penalties they give out, so I'm sure it would all be handled fine. I'm not getting into that.
we love the FIA.
All right, we made some predictions for this race. As you guys know, I'm currently 2 points ahead of Brandon. We're just going over our bold predictions here, but if you want to see the full recap of our predictions, head over to our Instagram, and they will all be posted there. I had another solid weekend here on these predictions. First off, before I even get to these, I went out on a limb and predicted that Max Verstappen wouldn't win this race and predicted the wrong guy, okay? On the full predictions, I predicted that Charles Leclerc would win, and it was Lando Norris, which is awesome. I'm happy for it, but I can't believe that I predicted Max not to win in a normal race and got it wrong. Whatever. I'm okay with it. Here are my bold predictions. First, I predicted that at least 2 bottom 5 teams in the constructors standings would score points, which happened with Vizcashap RB and Haas both scoring points this weekend. And I predicted that there would be a turn 1 incident in one of the races at the start, and that did happen with a turn 1 incident in the sprint race. So that's 2 for 2 for me on bold predictions this weekend.
And you walked away Saturday having both of those locked up. So it was a very relaxing Sunday for you to just sit back, things happen. So yeah, my predictions not so good, which is okay. We're a little bit behind Justin, but there's time. It's a long season. So yeah, I said there was going to be 5 retirements across both races. You didn't quite get there. I believe we had 3 across both races. So that was close, but yeah. And then I said that Oscar Piastri would score at least 8 points across both races. And Oscar was oh so close to doing that. He was on track for a great race.
Yeah, it didn't even just ruin Oscar's race. It ruined your prediction, too. I thought you were for sure on that. He was looking good after he collected a couple points in the sprint race. I was like, Oscar Piastri snags a top 6 here. He's ready to go. But alas, not to be. Looking like he could have finished P2 and absolutely crushed it. And Carlos Sainz just crushing the hopes and dreams of the podium pushers and Australian drivers alike. But that's just the way it goes. What are your parting podium thoughts before we leave these lovely people?
Parting podium thoughts is, man, what a great weekend. It was an awesome weekend. Formula One in the United States has been really exciting recently. Last few races have been great. And I'm excited for the next race. We've got Imola coming up, which is always a great track. Always usually has a lot of drama there. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the McLaren can do. I'm excited to see what Ferrari can do. Excited to see if Red Bull has any answers. So everything is on the table now, which is super exciting.
Speaking of Ferrari, I can't let them off the hook before we leave this podcast. Their blue livery, it wasn't blue. It just had a stripe on it, and it looked great. I thought the blue looked good, but it was probably the worst case scenario of their blue livery. We all expected a fully blue car. Not only did they not do that, but they just had a blue stripe and then had a different blue with the HP logo, which I specifically told them not to do. I said, put it in white and it's going to look great. And what do? They put a different blue on there. I think that's why they didn't win the race, is they're just too heavy with the extra shade of blue on it. And so get rid of it, make it white, and Ferrari is going to win in Imola. I'm very excited for Imola. I think it's a great track. I think a lot of the older Formula One tracks provide great entertainment, great racing, especially the qualifying laps. Just seeing the cars go flat out on these old circuits designed for Formula One cars to go as fast as possible are just very beautiful. And who knows, maybe next year in Miami, we'll find ourselves in the grandstand getting to see the Miami Grand Prix, seeing what it's all about. So
one last parting podium thought is I saw in the news this morning a picture of the menu of the food, some of the food for sale at the Miami Grand Prix. And I don't know where on the track this was. I don't know if this is general admission. I hope it wasn't. Or if this was in the Paddock Club. But some of those prices are just wild. We're talking $300-400 a plate.
Yeah, we'll still find our $20 plate of chicken tenders at Circuit of the Americas, then we'll be okay. You'll know where to find us this fall for sure. Yeah. All right, well, that is all we have got for another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment, let us know your thoughts on all our social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, wherever you find podcasts. You can find us. We will see you guys in the next episode. See ya.